This is the Outpost RBA podcast, where we lead security teams to higher ground and new perspectives needed to secure the frontiers of enterprise, with hosts Will Robus and Stuart McIntosh.
Welcome, everyone, to the Outpost RBA podcast. This is our 13th episode. I am your host, Will Robus, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Stuart McIntosh. Stuart, how are you feeling today?
Good. Change of seasons. Now we get to wear stuff with long sleeves. It's a gift. It truly is a gift.
Yeah, it's a gift, and one of the other gifts it's given me is a nice seasonal cold. So I don't sound my typical self, but hopefully it's not too much of a distraction. Because we have a very kind of cool and insightful topic today. And that is based on all the work we do with customers, the dozens of environments we've been in, the positive impact that we try to leave customers with. We're going to talk about the number one thing that we hear from customers, from Splunk customers, when we're doing our implementation of enterprise security and risk-based alerting. And Stuart, what do we hear the most from people when we're doing our work?
We need help. Oh, wait, sorry. When we get in there. No, it's usually not knowing that Splunk could do something. There's a lot of those like aha light bulb moments. Yeah.
It's something we've taken for granted because we've been doing this for a while, but it is insightful when we hear the customer say, I didn't know Splunk could do that. So that's what we will be talking about today. Before we get into the main topic, we always like to make a few housekeeping announcements. The first one is always to highlight the RBA Community. Our web presence there is rba.community. We also have a very, very active Slack group where you can pretty much post your questions 24/7 with a global network of Splunk enthusiasts, security engineers, threat detection engineers, people that are working in defensive security. So please check out that community as well as that Slack group. And it's also a good way to get plugged into our monthly events. We just actually had a workshop today, breakout workshop, with a Splunk partner talking about threat detection, tuning, and deployment. So that's a lot of great kind of deep dive workshops that come out of that group, as well as we try to do a monthly kind of meetup session that we call office hours to kind of just give an introductory to a lot of resources out there, as well as kind of have an open forum for questions and discussion. So again, that is rba.community on the web, or you can find a sign up to the Slack group on our website, outpost-security.com. The second piece we like to highlight is we have been doing a lot of what we call enterprise security assessments with Splunk customers, big customers, small customers. I think we're almost over kind of 40 deep dives with all kinds of different industries and environments. I was kind of thinking about this morning, trying to do the rundown of industries, and it's been healthcare, finance, banking, consumer packaged goods, industrials, manufacturing, insurance,
software platforms.
Oh yeah, SaaS, a couple of SaaS companies lately. Yeah, so it's been we enjoy it from a learning perspective, and just kind of an understanding perspective. But the cool part is kind of what customers get to see, and kind of in the theme of I didn't know Splunk could do that. What are kind of some of the key takeaways that customers have when we walk them through this assessment?
I think the two things that I hope we always try to make a little more accurate for them are two assumptions. One is our environment is not ready for XYZ. Like there's this gap that they believe, this significant perceivable distance in where they are and where they need to be to take advantage of something. So I hope we help dissolve that or bring it into what is closer to reality. And I think the other thing is the amount of effort people think things will need to take. I think we equate, I think just naturally people equate value to hard work or lots of work. And I think we've been taught if something's too easy, it must not be done correctly or as valuable. And I think what we do in those sessions is help them understand, like, no, you can make one change over here in 10 minutes and all of this gets better. And so we help kind of usher them through a different way of looking at their environment and how they approach even the to-dos. So I hope that that's one of the points that kind of leaves a lasting impression with people.
Yeah, that's something I've witnessed in being a part of these assessments for sure. There's Splunk is complex. It's incredibly powerful. It has a lot of layers and a lot of, pretty much everybody struggles with where to start at one point or another, especially since it takes really a couple of different disciplines to make it successful. So yeah, and that's kind of a good intro into the topic of today, which is what are kind of the 3 top things that our customers kind of see and realize. And they're some of them are a little more meta, but some of them are just kind of a simple aha. But they're all essentially kind of bringing this massive platform that is Splunk, and not only Splunk as a platform, but all of the data that it centralizes and brings to light, plus all the things that you can do with it, even from a detection standpoint. So it's really, and I think that's probably the most fun that I think about what we're doing as a company with customers, is that we essentially, our job is to bring it all together and make it work for the teams that we're working with, kind of on a repeated operational basis. So that's really kind of where it was inspired by the people we've worked with and the comments they've made. And then we took a little time reflecting on, all right, what are those kind of top 3 things? And hopefully it gives you a little insight on the path. But so yeah, let's jump in. Hopefully we're not too rusty today. It's been we took a few weeks off in between recordings, so we're happy to be back and have it be chatting again and get back on kind of the routine. But so yeah, let's jump into kind of our high level notes. So the first observation, I think is it's a little more meta, but it also makes sense when you start unpacking it. And we know that Splunk was built on this amazing ability to search all of this data. When I was first learning Splunk, the concept of schema on the fly, it kind of just blew my mind. And so it's incredibly good at sort of searching, but searching unstructured kind of data, or just a jumbled mess of literally text. So the way I kind of title kind of this first item is, hey, Splunk's really good at searching all of this data that it's bringing in, all of this external data. But hey, it turns out Splunk is actually really good at searching Splunk. So tell us a little bit more about that, especially from what you've seen in working with customers in the field, Stuart.
This is always a fun one because it seems so obvious in hindsight that you're like, of course. So where this usually comes up when we do work with customers is we usually have a search or we'll ask a question. Hey, how many of your detections are adding risk to the risk index, and how many are creating notables? And we usually get some answer like 20-ish for risk and maybe 50 or 80 on notables. It's like, oh okay. Why don't we just look? And they're like, well, what do you mean? Because to them, this involves opening up each search in content management, scrolling to the bottom, looking at those adaptive response actions and looking. So what we help show them is Splunk actually makes several APIs available, which people may see the API documentation. But what a lot of people don't know is there's actually a REST command in the search box that you can use. And we can actually point that command at the Splunk search head itself. And what that does is now all of a sudden we can surface configurations. So now all of a sudden I can list save searches, correlation searches, macros, lookups. I can actually start accessing everything that's in the settings GUI. We can start actually pulling it from an API and listing it in search results. So now what you can do is you can pull all save searches, or for our example, we have a search that we share with customers. Here's all save searches that are correlation searches, and here's the action field. And normally what happens is we can quickly count by risk or notable, and invariably the results are different than what they told us off their gut instinct, right? Because there were some changes or they forgot. I can't tell you how many detections people forgot about because it's buried on page 4 or something. So it's really great for showing that, and also showing like, hey, all of your searches are set to run at 5 minutes at the top of the hour. And these are the little things that they're like, I didn't know that because I forget when I have to go individually into each one. So this really allows this ability to not only list them, but then interrogate them. So you can interact with them with like stats commands or evals or wheres or search. So you can actually narrow in on, oh, okay, I want to move all of these notable detections to risk. And you can actually run a search to say, hey, here's how many we have left. So it's really great for kind of taking this process of evidence drive. Like, we use evidence to drive our processes. Here you go. Here's accurate information that you can reliably pull up whenever you want and keep working it. So it's really great. One of the nice things is in the show notes, we'll give a sample search of how to list some of these safe searches just to kind of get the wheels going. But it once people see it, then they get excited about, oh, I can see how many have all time, or they're set to run in real time, or like all these misconfigurations that Splunk will warn you about for performance. And you scratch your head and say, I don't know if I have that. Now you can actually list it and filter it and say, I don't have any of them. And here's why. Real quick note, the results may vary depending on what search head you run them on. So because we're doing an API call, it's going to ask the search head that you're running it on. So if you have like ES and non-ES, you might get different results because it's looking at that local search head. So just a heads up on that, little nuance, but once you start using it, it can become a powerful tool for any admins that are responsible for Splunk.
Yeah. And all the information's there, and it's, any reporting is really all about just communication, right? I'm asking a question that I want an answer to that'll help me communicate something, right? Whether, hey, this is what we're doing, this is what we need to do, this is what this thing looks like. And it kind of goes back to that alignment / bringing it all together piece. And, the example you gave about, asking him how many detections and notables and stuff, like, that's a very important question. But again, asking Splunk, searching Splunk for what is running in Splunk is not only, let's ask the question, but let's answer it with the gold standard of data, which is, this is what's actually happening. So yeah, that really is, it's almost like a little bit of a Rosetta Stone to start unpacking that complexity And more importantly, like if you have a distributed team, or you have people come in and out of the team, or maybe like some services people do some initial configuration, and like it's kind of this equalizer to bring to light what is actually happening, and then help you craft this path forward.
And a really great thing you can do. So one thing that we've talked about with these feedback loops and how to get teams working in sync with each other, one of the main items we talk about is standards. So we always run like we always write it to risk, and we always set the window to auto instead of some other number for a correlation search. Cool. We have standards. Great. Now, with this search, you can actually list any of them that violate those standards, and you can get them fixed. And so now all of a sudden, your consistency and your quality rises to a level that that everything's functioning the way it's supposed to. It's like a diagnostic check. Every time you run it, it's a quick peek into, is anything deviating? And so if we were to add a new detection engineer to the team, maybe they were unaware of some of these settings or standards. Well, we'd be able to see if what they're adding is drifting it a little bit. So it's a great, usually it starts off with people kind of bewildered, and then they see it, and then they start understanding it. And inside of 5 minutes, they start telling us, well, you could do this and you could do that. And it's like, yes, you can. And so all of a sudden they're like, okay, I have ideas. Okay, next.
Yeah, no, it opens up a kind of a whole new world and an infinite number of rabbit holes. So use it responsibly. All right. So the second point, I mean, I guess that I didn't think that was going to be that technical, but it turned out it kind of was. So I guess I didn't have a feel for what level we were at, but yeah, so that was definitely a lot more technical than I anticipated. Similarly kind of technical, but I would say on the critical path of trying to gain understanding of your environment to build a detection and alerting program, things like that, people tend to start logically at the sort of inventory part, right? Like, how do I know how can I find something without knowing what is actually out there, right? So from a systems perspective, users perspective, things like that. And you know, I would put it in probably the 90th percentile of when we talk to people. They always say, hey, we kind of have a CMDB, but we know it's not very good. We've tried to make it better, but it's really hard, and we're sorry.
And and we're waiting to do RBA until it's better. Like frequently, I think what happened to our industry with this pursuit of inventory, of accurate and timely inventory, is a noble cause, because before we were terrible. I mean, there were whole server racks plugged into a network that no one knew existed. Like that like it was bad. It was really bad, because imagine, how do you know if it's infected? You hope there's smoke coming out of that server rack. Like, I mean, it was sticks and stones that we were defending networks with. It was difficult. So I appreciate that we got better at it, but it almost became an obsession that without it, other things aren't possible. And so it almost put us in this paralysis where I cannot allow anything else to move forward until I get my hands around inventory. And honestly, I have watched companies spend millions of dollars a year, dedicated teams, 12 people, 24 people, who still say we don't have an accurate inventory on our network. So here's where we're at, right? This is who we walk into. They might have done it, they might not have, but they know they need to know their inventory. And so they come and they say, well, do you have ideas to make this better so that we can start doing RBA? That's usually the stage that we walk into. And so, sure, this is what assets and identities is wonderful at. And everyone will, if they've heard of it, they're like, no, I heard that thing doesn't handle results well, or it doesn't do it well. Yep, agreed. It's gotten better. The team put a ton of effort into this merging thing that they do. So much better, so much more efficient and stable. It's great. And because it can take different feeds and arrange uniqueness or similarity to create common records, we can combine something like Active Directory data. So for anyone that's listened to us before, this will feel very familiar because we say assets and identities, assets and identities. So here's the example of why. We'll take an Active Directory feed. So what do we get out of that? We get a host name, we get what groups that machine might be a part of. And some people will be like, well, it's a machine. Why is it a part of groups? Guess what? Patch management. Patch management is usually associated to a group membership to a machine. So we can find when is SCCM or SCOM running for updates, Windows updates and stuff. We also get what OU it's in. So where in the hierarchy of Active Directory is this? Oh, it's under critical servers. Well, that seems important. We also get things like machine passwords. So is this machine like updating itself or not? Did it fall off? So we can get a couple of those. Great. Thank you. But what I'm missing is, well, I have no idea what IP this machine has or who logged into it. So I'm going to go take something like CrowdStrike data. So now I can get device data off an EDR agent, CrowdStrike, Tanium, Sentinel, any of these. Take that device data, but now I don't have what OU is it in, what group is it a member of. We don't know that. All we have are like the diagnostics. Here's a MAC address, here's an IP, here's who's logged in. But what we can do is make two independent feeds, and we can connect them by the host name. And now all of a sudden that single record has more information than any other feed because it's a reflection of all of them. It's a reflection of what every feed knows about this machine. And so now all of a sudden we can dynamically build an inventory list that pushes into the 90-95% with a couple people part-time, and it's dynamic. So it's this kind of like exponential effect that you can do.
Yeah. So let me try to summarize that. The baseline understanding is typically, hey, we just need to look up our assets from our CMDB, right? And our lookup is only as good as our CMDB, okay? But the sort of wow/aha moment that we see customers go through is when you actually create a dynamic layered CMDB, if you will, on the fly that continuously sort of updates from all of those live feeds from like constant changes. And so it's this, like I said, a dynamic mashup that becomes a new source of truth, and that really doesn't exist anywhere else by itself because it can't, because nobody else is talking together. Nobody else is layering these different feeds of information with identical fields, but nobody has the full set of all of the fields to really roll everything up in.
If I can't trust a single source, either because it's just not there or it's struggling, then how do I find truth? Well, I'm going to take a different approach. Instead of putting all my eggs in one basket, what I'm going to do is distribute my sense of trust in a source. And I'm going to say, I trust all of these to know what they know. And if I put them together and stack them, I will know what all of them know together. So all of a sudden now I can trust the fact that all these feeds see something. So now it's not, well, do you trust CrowdStrike more than Active Directory? Depends. If it's machine authentications, I trust Active Directory way more because that's where things authenticate. But when it comes to what IP something has, I trust CrowdStrike all day. So why don't I take the elements that I believe they're the best at and stitch it together?
Well, and I'll even go one layer deeper on that. So for risk-based alerting, especially, it's important to look at sort of this criticality or priority factor, right, across assets and identities. And there's all kinds of little triggers or clues that might elevate an asset or an identity into a higher priority category or a critical category, things like that. And if you have these multiple sources of information, you can then use that in essentially your logic to say, well, if the endpoint data has this, I'm going to ratchet that up. But that's only in my endpoint data, and it's only because I can match it with all these other sources of truth, or at least like relative truth, that I get a chance to actually be accurate about what's really important to me from a risk standpoint based on who the user is.
And we can fold in a CMDB thread on top of it, right? So it's not either or, it's and. It's all. It's not this or that. We become an and, where it's like, give me any feed. I will take vulnerability scanning data. I will take DHCP handouts. I will take firewall config changes to try to find host name to IP definitions. I'll take any of it and just throw it all in the bin and let the merge process sort and stack and fill in. And so all of a sudden I get a more complete picture of what my world looks like.
Yeah. And I just thought of something else, because we spend so much time in enterprise security. And I would say this is probably one of the top reasons we do, is the assets and identities framework that is a part of ES as a product. So, because the REST API, that's just Splunk. That's a Splunk feature.
That's Splunk core.
And then I think the next one we're going to talk about is also just the Splunk feature. But
Correct.
this has such a powerful a foundational piece. But essentially, like, yeah, if everybody struggles with their inventory, essentially we can kind of solve that in a few hours, leveraging what's built into enterprise security.
And what we're talking about is assets, systems. I'm not letting identities off the hook, because how many places have we gone where they know that it's a partial view of the total user count? It's either only internal and not external users, or it's only from this company, not from another operating company, right? Like it's always this partial view. And so we do the same thing there. Give me every domain, not just one domain. We can do when I say multiples, I don't mean one feed per technology. I mean, a feed is a feed. So we can do 4 LDAP feeds if you want. And we can keep track of what operating company or domain did it come from. Oh, okay. Now all of a sudden I start getting closer to what my real user count is, or where my real sensitive machines are. It's great. Yeah. It's absolutely powerful.
And the challenge of any inventory, whether it be digital or physical or even financial, is to keeping it updated. So the cool part is you do this work once, you tweak it to be some level of confidence. I mean, we've been saying like 90-95%, but some level of confidence that is probably orders of magnitude above whatever confidence you have from a single feed. And you do that work once, and then you just kind of pay attention to it. So it's not something you have to maintain. It's something you have to give a little bit of care and feeding to, but it's not, it's hours a month, right?
It's the normal caveat, which is technology changes. So we're switching from CrowdStrike to Tanium. Okay. Yeah, you'll have to touch this because you're switching tech that you're using as a feed. Or we added a new operating company. Yeah, you'll have to change it because you're adding new feeds. but it's not an everyday thing. It's rarely even a weekly thing. It's more like, hey, there's a big project XYZ for a merger or an acquisition. Okay, cool. One of the things we want to do, get the following feeds from them into Splunk so that we can add them to our dynamic assets and identities. And then, shh, no one spread this. We clone a lot of these and just point them at a new feed. Don't tell anyone, but like different LDAP feeds, you can essentially clone it and just point it at a new domain. It's that easy. So like even when we talk about ongoing work, like we won't tell anyone if they don't tell anyone, but like admin wise, it becomes, with standardizing and layering, you break it into such a small unit of work that it's a copy paste edit. Like it becomes, and then just validate, just let it run and then validate it.
Well, the good news is I think we're like 25 minutes in so far, and we've done 2 very technical deep dives. So the only people that are probably still listening are the
admin. So we scared everyone away who would spread that rumor about what might help people.
Exactly. So all right. Well, that was kind of cool. I didn't think we'd have that many layers there, but yeah, it makes sense because we always start. I mean, it's the data coming in from a security perspective, and the next data we look at is the asset and identity feeds. All right. So the third item in the I can't believe Splunk could do that is definitely a little more on the surface, at least initially, a little more involved with the GUIs and kind of how that everyone uses it from a day-to-day standpoint. I that's all the intro I can give because otherwise I'm giving too much away. So what
we're talking about it. Give it away.
I'm trying to give you the thunder.
This should be called the everyone gets a giveaway. Like that's what this should be called.
I'm coming from the outside and it kind of seems like an obvious thing to me because this is kind of how and then again, if I've always customized any software that I've dealt with and built out business applications and all those things. So I probably take this for granted, but obviously it's not something that everybody knows about. So what?
Or how it works, right? People may know about, but not how it works. Okay, so ripping the Band-Aid, workflow actions. May have heard of it, may not have. What it is if you run a Splunk search and you open up an individual event in the search window, you'll see the extracted fields like source and dest and user. Cool. To the right of it, you'll see a little downward facing caret. Is that a way to call? Is it technically a caret? But it's the little boomerang. Anyway, when you click that, there's like there's a little menu that comes up, and there could be things in it like map this field, or open this field in Traffic Center, or Google this field, I think is one of the default options as well. So what it is it's called a workflow action. There is a specific configuration in Splunk that says for the SRC field, the source field, here's options to show as a workflow item. So each one of those entries you can enable or disable. Really important because I get tired of every field suggesting I map it on Google. Google doesn't know how to map my internal user ID on a map somewhere. Stop showing this to me. And so you can disable these things to clean up that list, because we're going to tell you about how to add things. First thing everyone says is, I added these 3 things, but they're buried because there's all this other stuff in here. How do I clean it up? Well, you can disable them, but you can also add them. So one really common one that we'll do, and I'll show an example of this on our show notes for the episodes that people can see. but a very common one is abuseipdb.com. Very common in the security world for putting an IP address in and looking to see, hey, is anyone reporting this as malicious or abusive? So what we do is we set a workflow action that says, for the SRC field, open this URL with this field value, so we can grab that destination IP or that source IP. We can actually grab it and dynamically put it in a URL. And then we can say, open in a new tab. So we can put all of this configuration in this workflow. And so what does it look like to the end user? It looks like contextually, you're helping me navigate with single clicks. Oh, I see an IP. I would like to look it up in Abuse IPDB. Click. No copy, no paste, no. The other thing that we notice is with SOC teams, it helps the team standardize on what tools they use for decision making. Like maybe some people use Joe Sandbox, other people use VirusTotal. Well, what do we want to do as an organization? And let's make it simple. Oh, we want both available. Cool. 2 workflow actions. But what's important here is that they're contextual. So what I mentioned is from a search window, here's options. Well, in incident review, when you see those fields listed, when you expand a notable, guess what? They're in there too, because it still sees the field. So we can then link it to Abuse IPDB again. So I only had to set it once. Here's the field name. Here's the action I want it to do. And wherever Splunk sees that field being used, it brings in that ability. So again, it's kind of this unfair advantage if you know what you're doing here, where I can make a small change here, and across the board, it's automatically available for everyone. And now all of a sudden, we can standardize training because we know that option's there for everyone. And we can standardize how we're communicating and investigating. It's super powerful. The other thing you can do with it is you can link it to internal dashboards as well. So if you have an internal dashboard that you want a risk object or a user field to go against. So a really common example, we had a customer that had an endpoint detail dashboard. I know what people are saying. Really? You didn't migrate them to assets and identities? We did. But what they had was a level deeper that they needed to know about. So they had, if I remember right, they had 4 or 5 different EDR technologies because of acquisitions and stuff like this. So what they wanted was, for anytime you see dest or source with a workstation name, hey, allow the ability to go to this custom dashboard, which tells us which EDR agent is installed. Is it the current version? Is it updating? Just kind of these health things. And so we created this workflow action that just dropped people automatically into that dashboard without them having to copy paste. And so that's what we're trying to save. We're trying to save steps, and we're trying to save copy paste or formatting issues, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean,
sorry, it was a kind of soapboxy, but it's a super cool feature that just people don't know how to take advantage of. That's all.
You made me think of a couple things actually. So, the first one is, we started the episode talking about, a big part of what we do is kind of bring all these things together, right? So, there's a ton of data and information obviously coming into Splunk. There's a lot of powerful kind of frameworks to establish and leverage especially from a threat detection and alerting standpoint. Assets and identities, RBA, those are all good threat intel, good examples. And a big part of bringing it all together is creating these processes that, it's a mix of standardization, right? Like we've done this a lot and essentially have, a pretty good list of standard best practices that we know work really, really well, right? Because we've seen them work And once you look at the alternatives, there's really not a better way to do it. But each team is different. Each company's different. They sort of have their outliers. They have higher volume in certain kind of maybe data and alerts than the smaller volume ones. So this, let's call it 80% standard or 80%. Hey, we know this works really well. It's that 20% that brings it all together for that team and for those specific groups and team members for that matter. So it's they're little things kind of on their own, but when you put them together as a system, and we love talking about systems on this podcast, it's really what ties it together and makes the difference. And that's where you get these orders of magnitude improvements and success, is because you've again operationalized it. And then kind of the second part of that, which is related, is just like taking and maintaining inventories, documentation is awful. Like, everyone hates it. It takes a bunch of time. It's not that useful from a practical standpoint. I mean, it's driven a lot by compliance. Like, it's just not fun. But our approach has been, thanks to, again, these feature sets we have in Splunk and ES, is why not do all the documentation in the application itself? And we've executed that on a number of different levels inside of our apps and our deployments. But that one-click workflow action is a perfect example of that, right? Like, and even the REST API. But yeah, let's hone our process down to a handful of options, and we have unlimited context, right? Any field in Splunk you can create its own list of actions for. So it's a little bit more maybe to set up and maintain, but like it's dialed in. And instead of having these long documented playbooks that you have to like read or update or even kind of click through, you just have it all on the screen there, and it's one or two clicks away.
And every field I mentioned, SRC, source, dest, user, if you notice the names I'm saying for setting up a workflow action, hey, those are SIEM compliant data model fields. Yep. So I don't have to set a Microsoft Defender host field name workflow action. What I need is for them to play nice with the data models. And then I know those aliases are available. So I can make a workflow action off an SRC field and not have to worry about 1,000 different technologies. Well, what do they call the host? I don't know. So this is where, and kind of what you were saying, which is, if we can do all of this in situ, like, hey, we fix data models and then we do workflow action, it's almost overwhelming how fast all these obstacles start falling over. It's almost as if they're knocking themselves over. When we thought it would be work, they're just tipping over themselves like dominoes. This is what happens when you just know these feature sets and you move through it intentionally. You can do it really quick. And kind of what you were saying about even the documentation, we, in our app, in the 0 to 1 app, we actually list, hey, here's configurations, and we do all the drill downs. So, and one of them is workflow actions, and you can click it and it pulls you up to the GUI of where to edit these. And that magic clone button, that's a big secret, is right there too. So if you want a different one, like you want Alien Vault Threat Intel as a workflow action, cool. Clone one and edit the URL, edit the label and the name of it, you're done. And so what we're talking about isn't just more efficient getting to a new future. What we're talking about is lowering that cost of ownership every year, because now there's not as much drift. Now all of the guardrails are up and running and effective. So now all of a sudden, total cost of ownership, because a lot of people say, well, we can't have Splunk because, I mean, we were on a call They said, well, it's Splunk ES. That's enterprise grade. So what do we need? Like a team of 5, 6 people? Whoa. But that's their perception because of maintenance and upkeep and configuration and admin. So they're not wrong. It's just so different because we happen to know about some feature sets that make it so that that's not required. You can do it with 1 or 2 people.
Yeah, and that's an evolution of the industry too, I think.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I know a lot of industries and companies suffer from probably what you call like a tool and technology overload. And I think cybersecurity has even more of a brunt of that because we're always trying to keep up with the latest and greatest threat and attack vectors.
I'm seeing people ask what are the security offerings against AI? Dude, we can't handle like firewall alerts. And we're already looking for new tooling for AI oriented threats. And it's like, I mean, I get why they're asking, but like, whew, man, we switch tools fast.
Yeah.
So fast.
So this is a little contrarian, I think, but in a positive way. And it's that I mean, and we've said this for a while now. Like, we've never walked into a customer that was really deficient in tooling or technology. Like, no one was ever like, oh, you guys are 5 years behind and need to buy a bunch of base stuff. That's just not the case anymore, which is a good thing. So I think the thing that we've seen and the things that we're advocating here are basically like, take a step back, look at what you have, because it's definitely powerful, and let's make it work for you. It's not an optimization. It's not a
someday.
Yeah, it's not a someday. It's not even a maturity thing. We talked about that in the maturity episode, right? So it is a, hey, let's take what we have, align them to what we need to do, and get the biggest ROI to become more secure as quickly but durably and foundationally as possible. And that's yeah. And so it's really interesting you brought it back to data and data models, because it's really, the path is the path, and you have to start where you're at. And let's start with bringing it all together and turning it into a system that we can execute whatever capability you have, but let's really level up based on the assets and the experience and what you have available. And that's, we have the tools. We have kind of, I mean, it's not even a bag of tricks. It's just basically like, hey, this works. It works every time. And you get this kind of value from it just by like asking the right questions.
Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things. What's super weird to me is the more you do these things. So take any one of these 3 things today. So grab the Splunking Splunk configs, like that REST API search. When you start doing it, just your activity will elevate your skill set. Because now all of a sudden you start thinking different about, oh, maybe I should set annotations. Oh, I wonder how many don't have it set. Let me just run a search. And now all of a sudden you're less afraid to ask questions because you know you can get to an answer. I think sometimes we refuse to ask certain questions because we know it's difficult to answer or it's labor intensive to answer. So we just kind of ignore it. And it's like, now you bake in the question answer into your day-to-day work, because you know all of a sudden your perspective expands a little bit about how this tool works and how we can make it work for us. That's the whole clue. Like, when I talk about disabling some of those workflow actions, that is 100% making the tool work for you. Stop, like, let's get rid of all the crap. I lost my mind because a SOC analyst told me one time that my entry that I needed them to pick, which was a frequent one, was below what they could click. And so they had to scroll to click it. And I remember almost losing my mind on this analyst. Are you kidding me? This is what you bring to me. Really? But what I did is I started doing the work every day. And it was like, yeah, that's annoying. You do that 50 times a day. It's annoying. And then it was like, wait, how does it decide the order? Oh, it's the name of the app and then the name of the config. Let's rename the app to 0. Hey, look at that, top of the list. And here the analyst thought I was a magician because all the options were the same. It just re-racked it. And they had no idea how. Plus, they felt like they were listened to. And for me, I learned something that I didn't know before. But it's all because I kind of knew where it lived. So it's just like these little things that you have to just learn as you do. So hopefully this helps kind of kickstart some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I'll bring it back.
Learn the tools.
Yeah, and I'll bring it back and kind of close out with, this is what we spend so much time doing with customers, and that's what's it's makes it just super worth it, because in a matter of a couple weeks, and that's all that experience is why we designed our 0 to 1 app and implementation process, and we use some of these techniques. Actually, we use all of these techniques in that app and then some. So there's a lot more too. So yeah, but anyway, it's really, like I said, about it's, and they're not shortcuts. It's truly accelerations to say, hey, this is how we're going to put this all together. We're going to do it in a couple weeks, and we're basically going to show you how to do it and why we do it. And then you just go off to the races. And like 80% of it, 90% of it is stuff you do once and you never touch again. So that's fun for us, and it makes our customers very, very happy. But at the end of the day, it's really just putting it all together and then saying, all right, now go do your thing. So
I don't disagree with that wrap up.
All right. Well, I guess that's a wrap. Again, I felt a little rusty today, but it's good to be back. Good to be back, and I'm excited to hopefully we'll record again next week and be even better. So
I think it's just fun sharing some of these little anecdotes as well of like, just I didn't realize this was a thing. Like I take a lot of my experiences for granted because I've just seen it so many times that to me it's like, yeah, we'll fix it. Not a big deal. But for some people, like, no, that's a total holdup for them. And it's like, oh, okay. I need to appreciate things from other perspectives. And that's kind of where this list came out of. Was I never appreciated it from a customer who's struggling.
Yeah. It's the old adage. You don't know what you don't know. And hopefully that's one of the reasons you tune into the Outpost RBA podcast. So for this episode, we will sign off and say thank you once again for listening. Please like and follow on your favorite streaming episode and make the algorithms happy. And we will talk to you all again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Outpost RBA podcast. Stuart McIntosh has over 20 years of experience building and maturing security programs inside Fortune 500 companies. In 2018, he gave a talk at Splunks.conf titled "Say Goodbye to Your Big Alert Pipeline and Say Hello to Your New Risk-Based Approach," which started the rise of RBA. As the creator and architect of risk-based alerting, he pioneers security methodologies at Outpost Security, which he co-founded with Will. Will Robus has spent the last 20 years in the operations or financial C-suites at technology and security companies, focused on what drives results and successful scaling. At Outpost Security, he works with CISOs to imagine a more expansive future for their SOC, once it has a solid RBA foundation. Leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Share it with your security team and CISO. Connect with us on LinkedIn and contact us at outpost-security.com to lift your team out of the fog of alert confusion with RBA 0 to 1.